Hello and welcome. You're listening to episode number 3 of Fablebreakers.
Today we're joined by Tori Sharp, a writer, designer, and comics artist who will give us some insight into her experience with art education and its effects on artists out in the real world.
I'm Jake Romano,
And I'm Carly Racklin.
and we're here to take the myth out of making something meaningful.
Knock it out of the park.
Yeah, you should have seen our other takes.
Oh gosh, yeah, but those are gonna go in the bloopers. So, all right, Tori, how many cups of coffee does it take for you to get 100% into your full creative groove? And follow-up question: how much of your paycheck goes toward your coffee habits?
That is not a fair opening question. You're digging up the dirt all at the beginning. Well, okay. In the book, The Writing Life by Annie Dillard, there's this line that I love where she says that, there's the amount of coffee she drinks in the morning is a delicate balance between, being able to work and, death. And I think that's sort of my take on it as well. So it takes a lot of coffee to get anything done.
Oh, that's good. Well, we all have our creative fuels. Some people like to take walks. Some people just like to pump themselves full of coffee, and that's what I guess that's your thing. I mentioned that because in your bio you said that you do freelance illustration and designing to fund your storytelling and coffee habits, and I thought that was kind of funny. Did you have a chance to listen to our previous episode with George at all?
I did. Yes, I listened to that.
Oh, awesome. Fantastic. So we started off his episode by asking him a kind of a percentage question, and I'm going to start the same way, too, for you. If you had to put a percentage on how much of your art education has influenced your creative life outside of art school, what percentage would you give it? How much has that affected you?
I think that our experiences are always going to influence us. I think the percentage is going to vary based on how much of it influenced me positively and how much of it influenced me negatively. So I'm sure 100% of it influenced me, but as far as how much is still helping me to grow as an artist or to create work that I'm proud of and that I want others to see, at least 10%, maybe as high as 30.
All right.
Okay.
Well, we'll definitely have to talk more about your experience so people get an idea of how much you're taking with you and how much you kind of left. I'm assuming that you were an artist before art school. Is that a correct assumption?
Yes.
So how are things different for you now? What have you taken away from art school that you didn't have before? And you can get as general as as specific as you want.
I think art school made me try things that I wouldn't have tried if I hadn't gone.
Okay.
I am pretty sure I would still be a cartoonist and illustrator and comic artist, but I wouldn't have been as brave about it if I hadn't taken certain classes like cartooning, which is an elective, or personal branding, which just helps so much with some of the business side of art.
But there were takeaways. I mean, I'm assuming that I'm going to assume it wasn't a waste of time for you. I think that you probably, just reading your bio and stuff, you probably have, I don't want to say a healthier outlook than George, but probably a little bit more of an optimistic experience.
I think I can look at it and say I didn't have the best experience at art school, but I feel like it was important for me to go. Whether it's because of the people that I met or the things that I was exposed to, or just that I had to work in an uncomfortable way in order to complete the projects and just stretch my limits. I don't think it's necessarily necessary that I went through that, but I look at that experience and I say that I know it helped me grow in those ways. So yeah, I am more optimistic about it. I feel like our attitudes can determine a lot of how we just go through life. So I'd rather look back at it and say, I know that some good came out of it.
So you said that you had a better experience, but did you see any similarities to George's experience? Do you think there are any kind of universal things that people find when they go to art school, that you found in your experience?
Yes, there are definitely universal things that people go through. And even though I'm looking back at this experience and choosing to say that I find positive things in it and not regret it, I won't say necessarily that it was even a better experience than the previous guest. Maybe I should clarify that. I got done with every quarter at the school I went to and thought I wouldn't go back. Like, I
Really?
just sort of got through it by the skin of my teeth and kept pushing through because I felt like long term it was the best thing for my career to have a degree and to get through the classes. And also, foundations are hard, and people know that going in. Not hard necessarily as far as what the coursework is. They take a long time to get through, to do all the work. They are hard in their own way, but I mean hard mentally to push through all of the stuff that you don't really want to do in order to get to the major classes. So I stuck through the first few years thinking the last year is going to be better. And it definitely was. I was finally drawing comics in almost every class and having more of a free range over the projects that I chose. And I got to work on more of my own stories and comics, which I probably would have been doing if I wasn't in school, but I got critique. And I think critique is one of the big things that
Awesome.
people
Yeah.
get out of art school. Especially when you're in the higher level classes and they've kind of weeded out the people who aren't really there because they love art. By the end of your school experience, the people who are still in your classes with you are going to be people that you look up to and whose art is different than yours and who you can really learn something from. And the professors are always going to be industry professionals at a school like the one I went to. So they'll be able to offer some expertise when they're reviewing your work and give professional advice about how to move forward. So all of that was definitely something good that came out of that experience.
Yeah, feedback is so valuable for creative people. And you can get some feedback online, but I feel like it's very polarizing. You'll either get, people who love you, love you like crazy, they don't want to tell you, no, or you get people who hate you or don't care. So I agree. I think that critique, for me at least, was really important. I didn't get that beforehand. I didn't know what I was doing. And to have other people tell me, no, this is a bad decision or this is a good decision, I think that was really helpful. So I agree. I think it's probably something, it's one of those universal things that people probably find. So that's encouraging to hear that, critique was valuable for you. So, yeah.
We get just as much out of critiquing other people's work. I learned so much from seeing the things that people were doing right or wrong in their projects that they were putting up on the wall or the board or whatever. It's just over and over and again for hours in these classes, you're trying to analyze why something works or why something doesn't work, which you can do on your own. Like critiquing my friend's writing always helped me become a better writer.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know we're talking about art school specifically, but I went to school for English and writing, and in my writing classes, we were basically doing the same thing where we had critiques. And like you said, my senior year was where all the people who wanted to be writers were in the writing classes, and they were so passionate about it. And there were times when I would offer criticisms of my peers' writing and then realize that the thing I was criticizing them for is something I do in my own writing. And it's always just, it helps to get critiqued, but also to be forced to articulate your thoughts about writing that's not yours.
Yeah, it helps you see things that you wouldn't otherwise see. And it's kind of reflective in that way. And it is important to know how to critique, I think, as an artist. And it's something we brought up before too, kind of about that input and output thing. Like, you have to be smart about what you're looking at. And that's not just in other, students' work, your peers' work, but now you can take that kind of critique vision, right, and look at other things and see, is this valuable? How can I take this and kind of introduce it into my own work? So that's a valuable skill that may not have gotten, on your own. You said that you critique, your friends' writing, but that's something that you wouldn't have gotten, I don't think, if you probably weren't in a classroom setting.
Well, one thing that you brought up, Tori, that George also brought up in the last episode is the idea that art school, or maybe just school in general, can be kind of frustrating because it forces you to take those kind of foundations classes. Even with me going to school for writing, I still had to take like math and science because it was just required of me. And those classes kind of force you to step away from your craft. And that can be really frustrating for people who want to just go to school for comics or cartooning and stuff like that.
Sure. I've known since I was very small that I wanted to be a storyteller, and I don't like wasting time. And so when I would get into certain classes where it felt like I already knew the material, or I mean, I was a senior in college and I was taking geometry, which I took as a freshman in high school. So I put that off because I knew I just didn't need it. Like I'd taken calculus. I didn't need to go back to geometry, but you just have to get through it for the credit if you want the degree. It can be frustrating to spend your time on something that doesn't feel like it's moving you forward. And it's already so hard as a storyteller to motivate yourself to work on projects sometimes, or to just keep going day by day and to tolerate all of the uncertainty that comes with being a creative professional, that just we don't want those distractions taking away from the calling that we have in our life.
Do you think that creative people, because you said that, like, we need kind of like that space, we need that focus. Do you think we, like, I don't want to say struggle more with our, because we have that internal thing, right? We're always like warring with ourselves. Do you think that we have it tougher than other people going to school, or it's probably tougher in a different way, right?
Yes, definitely. I think different is a good way to put it. Yeah. I think that creative people tend to struggle more with self-doubt. And when we do, it can be such a hindrance to just making things, which is sort of the whole job, is to make things. And I found that self-doubt is always the first step, that you have a blank piece of paper or you need to come up with an idea. And first you have to get through the fear that it's going to be horrible, because we are always feeling like frauds, or like we're not going to amount to anything, or all of those lies that will continue to be with us through our whole career. And that's okay. It's fear, and it's a common human experience, but it's something that artists in particular need to break through every day. And so I've started just trying to not waste my time with self-doubt as much. And it's helpful because when you identify that and say, this is not a helpful emotion, and I know I can either have like all of these fears that are preventing me from making a comic page today, or any of the other tasks I have to do, and if I give into that fear, I'll spend an hour trying to procrastinate and do other things. Or I could just say, you know what? I know that's going to happen, and I'm going to get to this page anyway, so I might as well just do it right now. And sometimes that works. Not always, but sometimes it gets you moving forward a little bit.
That's a great attitude to have, and it's so important to recognize that there is doubt, that there is self-doubt, because when you start off, you don't know what to do with it. Or people, it's unnatural to them. They think that the self-doubt means that they really are like worthless. So it's important to recognize that it's gonna be there and just to move past it. Yeah.
It just reminds me of that Vincent van Gogh quote that's like, if you hear a voice inside of you saying you cannot paint, then by all means paint, and that voice will be silenced.
Oh, I love that one. I think that in my head like every day.
Oh. So why do you think then, if we've established that self-doubt is kind of more prevalent for creative people, why do you think that might be?
I think it's a unique struggle for us because we wrap so much of our self-worth into our art, and we feel like it has such a potential for good, that like the book that you finish, you can hold in your hands and it's a physical object. But we as the creators see so much potential in it that may or may not be tapped as it goes out into the world. There's so many variables outside of our control that it can feel kind of overwhelming, and we can believe in something so strongly, but it's our thing. No one else is going to believe in it unless we convince them to. I think it can be really dangerous to wrap up our identity in our work. It's such a natural thing, but that's not what makes us valuable as people, like what we're able to produce or create.
Right. I do agree at some point. Like I think that it is important we should separate ourselves a little bit from the work, in the sense that like we're still valuable regardless of what we create, right? Because we're humans. But there's that balance too of, you want to, like, it's a risk. You have to throw yourself into something and you don't know if it's gonna, go somewhere. But you also want to kind of keep it separate too. So you want to throw yourself into it, but you also don't want to risk too much of yourself. You know what I mean? And waste your time. That's something I found too. Like, I want it to be, the best thing it can be, but that means I have to put 1,000% into it. But at the same time, if no one loves it, like, maybe I just wasted 1,000% of myself. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Or on long-term projects, there can be the thought that I can make a lot of progress today, and then there's still another year where I just have to trust my future self to every day put in the effort to bring this thing to completion. Because if you start something, especially a story, it needs a beginning, middle, and end. If you make the beginning and you never get to the other stuff, you don't have something that you can show people, but you still probably put hundreds of hours into creating a start.
Yeah. So kind of along the same lines there of, talking about storytelling, because you are an artist, but you're also a storyteller. And I love when that happens. And I think that the perfect marriage of those two things is what you did for school, which was sequential art, right? So that's kind of like storyboarding, that's graphic novels.
Yes.
In your bio, you said that honest fiction challenges you to be a responsible storyteller. What does it mean to be a responsible storyteller? What does that mean? You make it sound like storytelling is like a dangerous weapon or something.
It can be. We're shaping culture. The media that people consume in whatever form they prefer, whether books or comics or TV shows, is going to influence them. What we put in is what we put out. So even for people who aren't storytellers, if they're consuming shows that are mindless entertainment or have themes that are very damaging, they're getting information from that about how they should live, whether it's subconscious or conscious. And so I think there's a big responsibility for storytellers to be putting out ideas through their work that can challenge people to be better, or to show them how to be happier or live a better life, or to pursue their potential. So when I'm telling stories, I tend to start from theme, or to have something that I really want to say. And the core ideas of my stories, I always craft them to be something that I feel is meaningful to say. And it's diluted throughout the whole thing. Like I think people will get it even if they don't necessarily know why. And that's something a lot of stories do. I can tell people through my dumb bunny comics, which are very fun to make.
I love Boople. We need to talk about Boople. But go ahead, sorry.
Okay. But I mean, people will read that and they'll just think it's silly, but I am saying something through it that I feel is very important, because I want people to see that their attitudes can influence the world around them, that Boople's superpower is her enthusiasm. And so she goes out and faces the same scenarios that I do a lot of the time, but she has more courage than I do to just roll with the punches and to make something amazing out of some of the monotony in life. Like, she chooses joy, which is a privilege to be able to do if you have the opportunity. So in all, whatever I create, all of my work, I want to be saying something with it, because we just have that opportunity. And as storytellers, I don't think we should waste it.
So that's a lot. That's a lot of pressure, kind of. But I think it's good pressure, probably, right? So like, that makes us want to create something better. It's a big responsibility. You're right. It is. but like we shouldn't be just throwing, bits of ourselves out there. We should really be like putting, as much as we can into those themes, and into saying something really important.
Yeah, and because all of us we're all here because art and storytelling, these creative things are important to us. So I think if they've helped us so much, it makes even more sense that we should all be really intentional about the creative output that we have into the world.
Yeah, and more intentional creative output is more powerful creative output. I think probably when we were younger, like it was just something to keep us busy, right, or keep us out of trouble, or we didn't really understand why we were making these things. But now we've leveled up, and we know it's like that thing where you recognize a self-doubt, or you recognize the power that you have. I think that's the next step to creating something, really meaningful and powerful.
Yeah, and I think we just have the opportunity to say something honest through fiction or nonfiction, any kind of storytelling that we can't muster in other ways. Like I can say something abstract and real that if I was just trying to tell it to someone straightforward, it would never come across, or it wouldn't be an argument, whereas a story can be an argument and actually maybe convince people of something.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you talked about starting your stories with theme, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel probably a lot of people actually work the other way, or at least people I've talked to, and it's probably dangerous, right, to start with, I have this pretty character and I want to write them a story.
It's me.
Yeah, I kind of work that way too, because I'm much more visual. I see the character first and then I see other things. Have you kind of perfected your process to where now like you're thinking like, okay, I got to get this theme first, and everything else will follow?
Every story is going to want to be told in a slightly different way. So I don't think artists have to choose one way of doing it and do that every time. So some of my stories, I've just had an idea about a location or a set of characters or a premise for the world or like a hook. And I know that's the story I want to tell. So it's not always that I start with saying like, wow, I want to tell a story today about how you shouldn't be afraid of stuff. And so I make a world based on that. It usually does start with some sort of premise of like, wow, what if everybody had magic powers? And then, you go on from there. But it is pretty early. It is pretty early in the process for me, though, that I try to iron out what I'm trying to say with it. And that gives me a North Star to keep moving forward when I get confused about stuff in the story, what the next chapter should be, or something doesn't feel right. I can just say, is it on theme? Is this saying what I want it to say? And it's a good litmus for whether or not that chapter should be in the story.
Oh, that's so cool.
That's a good way to keep your characters in line and keep your story in line. I like the North Star analogy. That's really helpful, actually. Carly, have you found that to be true for you too? Because you were kind of saying before how you see the characters first sometimes.
Well, I kind of just get seized by an idea, like Tori was saying, like it can be a scenario or a setting, but I do tend to see that I just start with concepts because I like them more than asking myself why I like them or why I think they're important. And that's something I've noticed kind of in my editing process, at least with writing, that I go back to the beginning and there's all this stuff that happened for no reason that doesn't make sense because I just thought it was fun. And then I kind of have to be like, okay, why is this character doing this when it's totally against their morals and everything they stand for? So I kind of work backwards where I shave off all the extra bits that contradict the message that I'm trying to tell.
And that's great too. I've heard of a lot of people who do it that way, because I don't want to make it seem like the way I do it is like the way to do it. It's everybody approaches it with their own special flair.
You draw a lot of different comics, illustrations, graphic design. You write fantastic novels. Did all that come from school? Did you know you could do that like through school? How much of that was like awakened, kind of through your school?
So I think that what school gave me most of all was the feeling of being a professional in a broader industry. So I did some comic classes and I had assignments where I would draw short memoir comics, and I put those up on my portfolio. And then I happened to get a job in marketing because of my comics. And so I looked at that and felt like, oh, I'm not a graphic designer. Like, I don't know if I can go and do this. But I realized the more I dug into it that it was all visual storytelling, which at its core is what my major is. And I ended up loving it. And 2 years later, I'm still working for the same company and doing work for them. And it's been what's able to fuel my personal projects, so my comics and my books. So I think that going to art school, having classes where I was working directly with clients or building my own brand or learning to draw anything, whatever people want me to draw, I can just say, yes, I can do that. That gives you a lot of confidence to move forward and to operate in different situations than what you originally thought. So I'd say even though I came in knowing that ultimately I am a storyteller, that's what I'm going to do with my life, school gave me the ability to branch out from that and to explore other things I wouldn't have tried originally.
Yeah. How do you balance all this stuff? I mean, you mentioned that the stuff you do, for your job lends itself well to, to your personal work. But how do you balance all that stuff? Is it overwhelming for you at all? Like, does it get to you? Like, you do so many different types of things, but
you do comics, you write books, you do graphic design and illustration. You wear so many hats.
It can be overwhelming, and I have a problem with just wanting to do everything. So what you guys didn't list were like the board game and the other commissions and all of the stuff that like I think I can do it all today, right? Like that's just going to be taken across the finish line in 24 hours.
I do that all the time with my schedules. I'm always up to like, if I get to bed at 3 a.m., I can get up at 7, and that's 4 hours of sleep. And normal humans can, right? They can work on 4 hours of sleep.
No, I will not sacrifice sleep anymore. That is another thing art school taught me. I'm going to get 8 hours of sleep every night, and I'm going to be more productive because of it. I'm going to eat vegetables, and I'm going to take walks, and I'm going to sleep well, because otherwise I'm just going to be a puddle on the floor.
You're the responsible mom friend like we all need telling us to take care of ourselves. I always joked with my friends that I was the English major who actually got sleep. Like, I only ever did one all-nighter my entire college career, and it was for fun.
That was one of the things about art school that you hear, like, oh, you'll be up all night. Like on my tour of the school that I went to, we went through the architecture building and I saw somebody in a sleeping bag on the floor. So you knew what you were getting into when you come to this school. So when people ask me, what is art school like? Is it hard? I say, you expect it to be hard mentally. You expect the projects to be challenging, but you don't expect all of the physical implications of like, you're going to be tired. That was one of the major things that I did not like about art school. I've never liked school. I'll just be honest about that. I've always performed well in school, but take all of my advice and my opinions with a grain of salt that like I'm just not a personality who enjoys sitting in a room because people tell me to, or paying someone to give me work to do that I don't believe in through homework and classwork and things like that.
Well, I had kind of a similar experience too in that way. Like, I'm similar in that I don't like to sit down and have people tell me what to do, which is why freelancing sounds so attractive to me, to be my own boss and to not have people tell me what to do and drain all the creative life force out of me. There are some good things about limits and being stuck in a box sometimes, but man, it's exhausting sometimes. Yeah.
Like, even that idea of being your own boss can be kind of dangerous too, because you have to have a lot of self-discipline to make sure that you do the tasks you set out for yourself. So, I don't know. I think that's one thing that Tori is really good at, though. Or at least she has a lot of wisdom about it when I ask, because I don't know how to make myself do things if I don't feel like doing them.
I would say that that's something I'm good at because of a tendency I have to look forward. It's like, in 3 months, how am I going to get to a different place than I'm at right now? How am I going to improve upon where I am? How am I going to finish something and have a product that I can show other people? I don't like the idea of being in the same place a year from now, especially because I do dream big. Like, I want my life to matter. I want to continue to have freedom as a freelancer because I enjoy it for many of the same reasons that you listed, Jake. Um, I'm motivated to make my own decisions in life and to not get put in another scenario of doing things that I don't really love for other people. If I had to do that for a while to like keep funding my art and coffee habits, as I say, it's like I'll do that, but I need to know that I can still be doing the things that I feel like I was created to do. I also try to have grace when I don't get everything done and not let it bog me down. Like just keep moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
The next day it's a new list, it's a new challenge. It's okay as a creative person to just follow your whims sometimes and to doodle, like we need that, or to read is also really important. Like we need to fill the tank, which I think you guys were talking about in episode 2.
I just wanted to comment. I think that's really powerful to be able to see ahead and know what you want, and to be able to really like visualize it really crystal clear as you can make it, because that makes it so much easier to actually get there, you know. I think that's really powerful, and you're probably ahead of most other people who just kind of flop around and like, oh, you know, who knows what I'll be doing in 3 months. But like that's really cool, like to say like 3 months from now I want to be doing this, and I'm sure you probably have the gumption to actually like get it done. It sounds like you do.
Oh, I sure hope so. It does come to a point sometimes where you just have to make a decision. Like sometimes you can't juggle everything. Like sometimes things can happen in seasons and you work for a few months on something and then switch gears. But right now I'm at a junction where I have to choose what these next few months are going to be about, because I know if I leave all of these things on my list, things are going to fall through the cracks and probably nothing will actually come to completion. I have to just say, this is the thing I'm finishing, and the other things are filler to just keep moving forward on during whatever time I have left after my main project and freelance work.
Yeah. Well, speaking of projects, one that you've been working on for a while is your wonderful webcomic about Boople, the bunny. Please tell us about Boople. What's her origin story?
Oh, her origin story. Okay. Boople just started out as like a little bunny friend that I kept drawing in different situations. Originally, she wasn't going to be a comic or a story or anything. I just wanted to design a character. So I made a little bunny with glasses, and she was usually either reading books or drinking coffee. And sometimes she would come along with me on my adventures. So when I took a train down to a writer's conference, she was riding on top of the train, and like little silly things like that. She was always just coming with me. That character kept growing, and even before I had a comic for her, people seemed to latch onto her and just like the design and her optimism and all of the silly things that she would do. So last December, I was sort of between projects. I had one freelance gig that I thought was going to work out and take my time for a few months, but it fell through the cracks like a week before the project was supposed to start, which turned out to be a really good thing because I launched this webcomic right around that time. And at the beginning, I was able to be putting out 5 Boople pages a week and just get it kickstarted. And since then, it's been 1 or 2 pages a week of just her silly adventures, which are always semi-autobiographical for me. She still does a lot of the same things I do. She does the things that I think about doing but don't actually do, like finding a phone number in a library book and then actually calling it. Like I found a phone number and I tucked it back in the book and put it away, but she would want to know who that person is and become their best friend and ask them. Yeah.
As far as planning for Boople, because you said at the beginning you were doing 5 pages a day, or 5 pages a week, right? But now you're doing one or 2. Are those pretty consistent right now? How much planning goes into each strip kind of before it actually like it gets published or, you know, pushed out on social media and stuff?
So after I get an idea for a strip, it doesn't take very long to make a single page. It can be anywhere from like 3 to 5 hours. So I can do it in a sitting. So I'll usually sit down and make a list of ideas for various strips for the upcoming weeks. And then anytime I'm stuck for an idea, I can go back to that list. We talked about the blank piece of paper being scary. And so that sort of eliminates that if I have a bunch of jokes ready for my comic strips that I can revert to, and then that keeps me moving forward to have the hard part out of the way before I start drawing. But I have a Patreon for Boople Doodles right now, and that's been really motivating to get me to keep putting out pages or sketches on the Patreon, or just doodles and things like that. I mean, right now there's like 4 people out there who are like, I want you to keep making this comic, and I'm going to invest something in it. I think that's beautiful.
I've started supporting more artists on Patreon. I'd like to encourage anyone who's listening, and we'll give you a Patreon link in the description for this video. But just in general, like if you find an artist on Patreon, and like it's someone you really admire and you love seeing their work, like really, I think it's important to decide whether or not you're gonna support them, financially, because we need creative people. The world needs us. We need them. I think it's so important, and I just love Patreon. It's just a neat, really cool platform.
I love it too, and it really means the world to us to just even have people comment on our comics, like any engagement with the content itself or through platforms like Patreon just helps us keep going as creators, because we want to connect with people. Like that's what so much of this is about. It's about expressing our own experiences and being honest. But Madeline L'Engle, who wrote A Wrinkle in Time, she's got this quote. She said that the author and the reader meet on the bridge of words, and I'm paraphrasing. It's something like that. But that's just one of my core beliefs. Like, I'm saying something to you and you are hearing it, and I want to hear back from you. Like, I want us to have a conversation through the ideas that I'm posing in my work, or through actually getting to know you guys.
All right, so it's something that Carly's asked before, and I always like to ask. There's this concept that what we're creating is worth it. And you kind of expressed that a little bit in the idea of the conversation. Is art worth it? What is there in art to gain for you?
Art is worth it for me personally because I feel like it's the most that I have to give. And that even though I could have done other things, none of them would have really satisfied me as a person. I don't think art would be worth it for everybody, but I think to those who have a passion for it and who feel like they can do something meaningful through it, that it's really the only option for some people.
That's what George said too.
Yeah.
Kind of similar. We asked him what, could you see yourself doing anything else or something along those lines, and he said, well, it's the only thing I can do. I had to do it. That's kind of an interesting thread I'm finding between people.
It's what you're built for.
Yeah. And to get back to the thread of art education, I will say, even though my college experience maybe wasn't what I was hoping for, I had a really good art education in high school. That the teacher who influenced me so much was just such an encouragement to get me to actually pursue art as a career. And it meant so much to me because he's so careful about who he tells to move forward with it. Like, he identified this in me before my family did, or a lot of other people in my life would have noticed it. He just saw that I couldn't not do this. And that was really hard for my family maybe to accept. They're supportive, but I think it confused them that I was trying to become an artist, because it wasn't something that I was naturally inclined towards when I was younger. It was something I discovered maybe a little later and on in my teenage years. So just having that teacher encouraging me to move forward as an artist, and also helping to convince the people in my life that this is what I need to do, that was invaluable to me. And I don't know if I would have been in the same place today creatively if not for that influence in my life. So there's a lot of good that comes out of art education, and I'm not against art education. It's just really hard to do right. And some people are meant for that, and some people aren't. Yeah,
and you're mentioning this kind of this teacher who's kind of a mentor to you, and I don't want to say like you got to look at art education and kind of separate the people from like the system of art education, because I had I had that too. Like, I didn't like the act of going to class and sitting there in the classroom, but I did have like professors who poured a lot into me, and aside from the fact that they were giving me homework to do, like, I really did enjoy their input, and I enjoyed being in their class. So it is important, kind of, along that art education discussion, to kind of separate the people sometimes from the system and see what you're going to get out of the people, what they're pouring into you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I had a few amazing teachers at college too. One of them in particular, I was able to do an internship class where I was doing an internship for a company, but every week I had to check in with her. And we would start off talking about the internship and the like classwork I was doing for that. And then it would like change into these other conversations about storytelling and comics and life and like all of these other things. And that was a mentorship. And I had mentorships with other professors in other capacities, but that's like the most valuable thing. And my friends who really seem to love the school that I went to, because some people do, don't get me wrong, like it is just right for some people. They were usually the ones who would stay after class and ask very specific questions and really make the most out of it. Like, we have a lot of responsibility in how our experiences go in college and kind of in everything in life. Like, we've got to dig for gold sometimes. So we want it to be handed to us because we're already paying for these classes, but there's still a give and take.
Yep, and you mentioned attitude towards the beginning of when we had started, so that is really, I think it's probably a big key to whether or not you're going to have a good experience at school and whether or not you're going to muscle through. And that attitude shows, I think, in Boople and in just talking with you. So,
Thank you.
So, to wrap up for this episode, if someone were to come to you and say that they're kind of on the fence about going to art school and pursuing their creativity in a more professional way, what advice would you give them so that they can make the best choice, whether that is educating themselves or pursuing art education or something along those lines?
First and foremost, writers write and artists make art. So just do the thing that you love. You need to do some soul searching and find for yourself whether formal education or going at it alone or finding alternative education routes is right for you. But no matter what you pick, it's going to be really hard. Like, this is not the easy life to pick. A lot of people go to art school thinking it's going to be a party and that they're like, discovering themselves and going for all sorts of reasons that aren't just hard work and learning a craft and dealing with all of the emotional things that we've addressed that come as part of being an artist. And while it's hard, it's also going to be so worth it if this is the thing that you really are called to do. Like, don't give up, keep moving forward, stick close to your friends who can keep you going, and just find something within yourself. Like, don't let yourself lose your love for art, because along the way there are going to be a lot of things that try to stop you from loving the thing that you're making. Like, it's just not worth it. And also explore. You learn a lot more from a day of doing studies from an artist you like and pursuing those interests or drawing people in public than you do from months of drawing your own characters over and over in the same way that you already draw them. Like, we grow as artists by expanding our horizons a little bit. It can be bit by bit, or just even if you're in school, you are still responsible for your own art growth.
Oh, that's fantastic. Good advice.
Yeah.
Good advice. Thank you, Tori. It has been a pleasure talking with you and hearing about your experiences and meeting with you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you both. This has been really, really fun. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you. That should do it for today's episode. Tori's website is noveltori.com. You can also find her on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at noveltori. You can read her adorable webcomic Boople Doodles on Tapastic and find the link for it on her website. And you can also check it out on Facebook. And we'll have all these links in the description of this video.
And thank you to our listeners. We appreciate your support. If you're into busting up fables, then you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Tumblr, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, all at Fablebreakers. And that'll do it for today's episode. I'm your host, Jake Romano.
And I'm Carly Racklin, and you've been listening to Fablebreakers.